Welcome to The Brain Factor, hosted by myself, Joy Riddle, and Laura Hawley. We're a part of Meridian Behavioral Healthcare, where we believe that wellness is within everyone's reach. This podcast is a conversation about what research-based protective factors look like in real life. Our hope is that you'll walk away with something that you can use in your own life and have had some fun with us along the way. So let's get started.
Welcome to The Brain Factor. I'm Laura, and Joy is with me as always today, and we are super happy that you have joined us. I think we have a really interesting topic to unpack today. So we've recently been talking a lot about biases, right? And biases, when we say that word, it tends to make us think of things that are very specific and very personal, and I might have a bias here or a bias about that, or that person might have a bias towards another individual or whatnot. But there are some fundamental biases that are built into all of our brains just as human beings. And we want to talk about that today, what they are, where they come from, why they're there, how they serve us or don't serve us, and ultimately like how they really get in the way of resilience and positive mental health. So
it's exciting. Yeah. So tell us about the biases that we're going to talk about today.
So the first one that I really want, it's really two, and they work hand in hand, but the first one that I really want to talk about is the negativity bias.
It's my favorite one.
Right.
It's my favorite bias.
So, and we've talked on this show before about negativity in general, positivity, negativity, optimism, toxic positivity, all of that. So yes, this is tied into that greater conversation, but it's a very specific way that our brains are wired as human beings that from the very beginning protected us, right? And now
caveman,
right, in the caves, this was a good thing. This was important. But we have changed and we have evolved, and this is still there. And so what does this look like? This is this idea that as human beings, we weigh negative experiences very differently than we do positive ones, right? Sounds super simple, shows up in ways that are very complex. So what's an example? If you have a day where you have had 2 or 3 really good things happen and 1 bad thing happen, and then I say, how was your day? You're highly likely going to say it was not great. And you're going to cite that 1 bad thing as the reason why.
Even if you had 10 good things happen.
Right. It sticks with us. And it doesn't just stick with us in a way where we place more importance on it. It's the way in which we hold on to it and savor it as well, right? When we have experienced something negative, and if I were to ask you why was that negative, right? You could give me a lot of reasons why. Very detailed information. You're going to tell me how you feel about it, how it made you feel, what happened, what the implications are. There's going to be a lot there for us to unpack. And if I say, well, tell me about a good thing and tell me why that was good, that's a much shorter conversation. It might even be awkward. It might even be like, what? I don't know.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
So we do respond very differently to unpacking positive experiences versus unpacking negative experiences. You shared something really interesting though, right before when we were kind of just getting set up for this today, about the way that you savor negative experiences that I think is a very evolved and mature way. And so
thank you.
So go, girl.
So rare I hear that.
But I do want you to share that because I think a lot of people would benefit from that. Because you were like, yes, I do. You acknowledge that negativity bias, but you do something with that I think
I do. So I always say I learn so much more from my failures than I do from my successes, because my successes, they happen and I'm just like, checkbox, check, move on. But when there's a failure and something bad happens, I look at it from every single angle, every aspect. I think about it. I try to figure out what I did. What could I do better next time? How could I change this? How can I prevent this? How can I have a better outcome going forward? So that negativity, that bias that's making me hang on, because it came up because you were telling me, you'll start to think about, you dream about it. You thought, it's in it's in everything. And I thought, well, that's actually, I like that.
You're like, that serves
That's
me
good. That
sometimes.
serves me really well,
Yep.
because I'm like, okay, stop. What happened? How do you fix this for the future?
Yeah, and that application piece of
Yeah.
like what went into it that's preventable
Yep.
or changeable or that I can control or that I don't want to replicate, right?
Or I'm just not doing that thing again.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's I think that is such a positive way to harness the naturally occurring negativity bias that we have, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not fighting against it, and there are tools where we can actually actively fight against it, and we'll talk about some of those today as well. But I think that's such an interesting take that you're like, no, I embrace that, but it's not negatively impacting your mental and emotional health because you're using it. You're using it for better, right?
Yeah.
The one thing I would challenge with that is, in that you were like, with the successes or the good things, I'm just like, whatever, I take the win, right? I'll celebrate the win. I do think that idea of replication, searching for that is still can be a value in the same way.
Oh, I think it totally can be a value. And I wish that I took the time to say, this went well.
Why did it
so
go
why
well?
did it go
Yeah.
well? What happened? What can I do to make it better? Or what can I
Or even just to make
savor,
it again.
replicate, do it
Yeah.
again? But I just don't give it any time.
Right.
I don't, because it was a success. Whatever.
Yep.
Move on. I don't have time. I've got a busy life. I've got a lot of things going on. But when it's a failure, it's like, oh,
Yep. Okay.
I
What went wrong?
don't like failure.
Right.
But I also know that it is a part of growth.
Yep.
So the more I fail at things, and I'm not saying I want to be a complete failure and fail all the time. I want like 150 successes to 1 or 2 failures.
Right,
But
right.
the more I fail, the more I learn, the more I grow.
There are opportunities,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that, so when we aren't doing that, right, when it's not serving us, what it looks like is I've had 2 successes and 1 failure at work. Therefore, I am a terrible employee and I'm bad at my job.
I'm a failure.
Right? I'm
Yeah.
a failure, right? I've done all of these wonderful things as a parent, and I really stepped in it here with this one
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
I'm a terrible parent.
Oh, and I do that all the
Yeah,
time. I
yeah.
think
So-
we talked about that last month.
Yep, I've had sometimes that shows up, if you're in an academic space where I've had these, several great grades and I really struggled on this one, I'm stupid.
Yes.
Right? Therefore, that's what that means. I'm going to weigh this in a different way. And sometimes we'll even excuse or dismiss the positives. Well, that was easy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, everyone can do that. Oh, well, that didn't matter as much, right? And so so that it frees us up to really focus on those negatives and in the way that the negativity bias wants us to do, right? When we are in that place, it starts to combine with another bias that we have. And this one, I think more folks who are listening or watching may have heard of. And this is the confirmation bias.
I feel like this is a scary bias.
It is a
For
scary
me, it's
bias.
a scary bias.
So the confirmation bias, again, we are wired with this. There's only ways to manage it, not eliminate it, right? That's what I mean when I say we're wired with this. But the confirmation bias is that we naturally collect evidence that supports and proves, if you will, how we already think and feel, and then we dismiss and reject everything that might contradict how we already think and feel. That goes against it, right? So if this is what I was just talking about with dismissing those positive things, I got 2 A's and a D, therefore I'm stupid because everyone got an A in the one class and then the other class was super easy and the teacher liked me, right?
Yeah.
Versus, well, this one was the real test and
Yeah.
I got a D, therefore I'm stupid. There's my evidence for. I've dismissed all the evidence against and I have focused on the negative, right? So now I'm seeing both biases at work there.
Right.
And what is that doing to my self-image, to my self-esteem, to my emotional state, to my worth, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a really, really tough one, that confirmation bias.
I think it is. And I think I think we do that here on this podcast, not in a bad way, but oftentimes we'll bring something in and I'll be like, oh, I saw this Facebook reel. And this thing was going on. It was so cool. And I went and did some research, and this is what I learned. Right. So, because if I see that reel and I love it and it's great, and if I just come on to this podcast and I say, this is everything, it's great, it's fantastic, but I never thought about doing some research, looking at other sides, hearing what other opinions are, seeing if there's any science that supports it, which is why confirmation bias is scary to me, is because I just take this in and then I roll with it, and it's what I believe now without giving any, real deep thought of my own to it.
Well, here's what's scary about confirmation bias. So what you just said about a Facebook reel, right? A social media algorithm is a confirmation bias, right? The algorithm decides what you think and feel and what you like, and then it gives you everything about that.
Yep.
Right? So then we start to believe that is the standard, or that is
because
how
everybody thinks that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that, again, I feel like the past couple of episodes I've been picking on her a little bit, but it's a nice break for my husband. But my daughter is a teenager and is having some self-esteem issues when it comes to her skin, because she's struggling a little bit with acne and things, and she feels like,
she's gonna love that you just told the whole world that.
She doesn't watch this, it's fine. I wish she would, but yeah, Mom, that was great. But she actually has beautiful skin.
She does. She's a beautiful girl.
But she gets one pimple and she thinks that's the
end of the world.
Yeah. So I noticed because I'm in my house, we don't have privacy. So I was in her social media account the other day, just looking at what she's looking at and who she's talking to, and I see reel after reel after reel showing up on the suggested for her. That's all about like skincare and not in a good way. Like, it was all about like loading it up with makeup, loading it up with products, like
getting instead of when the better way is to leave it, let it heal.
Right. The only normalcy was a completely clear porcelain face. Right. Yeah. And it was just reel after reel after, and I was like, where are all the cat videos? Like, this is what you've been consuming, right? Because she's a big fan of funny cat videos. But and so I had that conversation with her, like, hey, like, I've noticed this, and this is all that you're consuming, and it was eye opening for her. She was very open to that conversation.
Yeah.
That, we find what we're looking for, right? And that is also hardwired into my brain. So that brings me to the third thing that I wanted to introduce today, and that is that there is a part of our brain, and it's called the reticular activating system. And that part of our brain controls some really basic human functions. It controls our heart. It controls our lungs. It controls just some very primal functions, and our consciousness, which is looped into that same category. So what do I mean by that, and how does this fit into the biases? If you are car shopping and you decide you're going to get a red Jeep, and then all you see on the road is red Jeeps. You never realized how many red Jeeps were out there before, right? How many times has something like that happened to you?
Yeah,
right?
a lot. Every time I get a car.
Yes, and when we become aware of something, all of a sudden it's everywhere, and it's all we see, because we told that part of our brain to look for that. And that part of our brain is very good at doing its job, and it's going to show us that over and over and over again, just like a social media algorithm. Right?
Yeah.
So we are getting it from all sides now. We're getting it from our own insecurities. We're getting it from our brain that's showing it to us in the world. And now we're getting it on the social media algorithms as well, externally. And it's really reinforcing this confirmation bias that we all have. So how does this show up when it's bad, right? Like, okay, I've decided that all people are bad in this one same way. Maybe it's I'm just seeing a lot of division and racism or whatever it is, right? It's this really negative thing that's got me feeling down and low, and I'm feeling like it's rampant, right? Now my negativity bias is causing me to focus on that. My confirmation bias is showing it to me over and over and over again. I'm rejecting all the good I'm seeing in people and all the inclusion and diversity and all of that, right? And I'm probably consuming that online, so now I'm seeing it over and over again in my algorithm, and my reticular activating system starts showing it to me in the world. It's going to be very hard to convince me that the entire world is not that way.
Yeah.
Right? So that's when unchecked, that's where we end up, right? So there's a couple of tools that we have that we can use to combat all of these various things. One of them is one we talked about very early on in this podcast, and that is the practice of gratitude.
Right.
So, and we have a whole show on that, so I'm not going to bog us down with that. But if practicing gratitude is something that kind of makes you roll your eyes, or you're not really sure what that actually looks like in its functionality, go back and watch that episode, because we break down that really well.
Yeah,
I think.
fully.
A couple of others is, and you talked about this really well before. Talk to us about, like, if all I'm seeing is evidence for something, how do I find the others? Like, how do I balance that? You talked about that before. Share that with us.
Before in another episode, or just a little while ago? Okay, what did I talk about?
When we have to look at the other side of issues.
Oh, when we have to look at the other side of issues and how we go about doing that. Yeah. So, well, I think I just said it a little while ago with the TikTok videos or Facebook Reels, that type of thing. When I see something, I need to take a step back, because if I'm like, this is really cool. And then I turn around and I'm like, okay, well, let me learn more about that, and let me see what other people are thinking about it. Let me see if there's any evidence that supports it. Is there research? Is there valid sources that I trust that think the same things?
Yeah, and even knowing like what that opposition is, even if you end up not agreeing with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, totally. Sometimes I know. I'm like, ooh, okay, let's move on from this. We're not going to do that.
But it's still valuable to know that some people might see it that way.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Maybe there's a body of evidence that says this and a body of evidence that says that, but in your educated, summary, you go, you know what, this is where I fall on the issue, right?
Yeah. So I think before this episode started, we were talking about debates.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where I brought it up, and I forgot. Well, when you asked me, I'm like, what did I say? But we were talking about, like, in debating, you have your position and you have to defend that position. But the only way you can win that debate or that argument is by knowing what the other people are going to say and what they're going to do and what their evidence is, and not knowing exactly what they're going to do, but what are the arguments against what you believe. And that can be fine, and you can still believe what you believe. You can believe the color orange is beautiful and someone else can think it's not. You just listen to what they say, and then you know how to win that. Oh, well, it's got this in it and that in it.
Right. Warm color versus cool color versus
exactly.
Tone, right?
Yeah.
Know what all of those
not related to the shirt I'm wearing today. If you're watching the video, I didn't even know that.
Nice. Well done. But yeah, so I think going through the exercise of and I'm a big proponent for like even those things that aren't serving us, like expecting yourself to reject that immediately is just unrealistic, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's what naturally occurred. You have this negativity bias, this confirmation bias, and here's what that's created, right? So going through something like an exercise of looking at what the other side is, knowing that you're naturally rejecting that, so let's unnaturally embrace
at least know something about it.
And going through those motions can help us change our mind. We can make the decision then, okay, you know what? There is more evidence here than what I was looking for. I think that's important.
And even though I prefer this other thing.
Right.
This one's not so bad.
And we're going to create balance in our mind, and it's going to temper those biases a little bit. And then positive affirmations.
Yeah.
Again, a couple of episodes we talked about laughter, and we talked about even if it's not real, it has positive benefits. So like going through the exercise of positive affirmations, if your negativity bias and your confirmation bias is telling you something about yourself, right? Practice that, looking in the mirror every day and repeating those positive things, even if you don't believe them right away. Going through the motions of doing that, and not only that, but that part of our brain that's searching for the red Jeeps is also listening, right? So
yeah, that is kind of amazing. When you said that
Yeah.
to me a little while ago, we just discussed that, and you were
Yeah.
like, your brain is listening.
Your brain is listening. It's kind of like those targeted ads when
Yeah.
your phone is in your pocket and Facebook still seems to know what you want to see in your suggested, right? Like it's listening, right? So the algorithm in your brain is also listening, and it will start showing you things that you are asking it to look for. Super fun. I don't know if we can add this in post-production, but because it's a YouTube link, but in case we can't, Google awareness test. And there's a YouTube video, and you will see two teams playing basketball, and one is in gray or black and the other is in white. And watch that. That is a perfect illustration. It's like 2 minutes long, not even. Perfect illustration. It's actually an ad for cyclists.
Oh, okay.
But it's a perfect illustration.
I'm gonna have to check
of
that out.
The fact that it's easy to miss what we're not looking for, and we find what we are looking for, right? And so it's very eye-opening. So, if our amazing producers here can pull that off, then we'll have that. If not, Google it. It's worth trying to take a minute to look at it. That's really a great example, right? Sometimes there are two more tools I want to share before we wrap up, but sometimes you can't fight these biases on your own. Sometimes we have to rely on the people that we know care about us and don't have any reason to lie to us about this to help us see things from a different angle. So if we've done all these positive things as a parent and then we've really stepped in it and we're like, I'm a terrible mom, maybe that's when I go to my friend and you go, Laura, you're not a terrible mom.
Right.
You know? Or that joke that your family always says, if only we had a perfect mom.
Right.
Like that's when we sometimes have to default to the people we know have our best interests at heart. And then if all else fails, if all of that fails and you really can't get out of that, you're completely convinced and you can't get out of that,
Take out the big guns.
yeah, therapy can help.
Yep.
Counselors can help. Like those are folks who are trained to walk us through those things and who know how our brains are wired, right?
Yeah.
And they've got more tools than we would know to share on this podcast about how to really combat that and help those things serve us more than harm us, right?
Yeah.
So that's the takeaways, right? There's tools we can do at home. There's tools we can rely on other people for. And then there's also clinical and therapeutic tools for this. But know that it's not anything you're doing or a way that you are dysfunctional, right? Our brains are just wired in ways that sometimes don't serve us super great. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next month. Thanks for listening to The Brain Factor. Joy and I are so thrilled to be having these needed conversations. We'd love to hear your feedback on this episode, so if you could drop a comment or leave a review with your thoughts or any requests that you may have, it would be appreciated. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Living a healthier and happier life starts with one step, and we're excited to be on this journey with you. Until next time.